What's up, everybody? This is episode 7 of Lessons with Strangers, and I'm here with Sherman. Great guy. We've known each other for a while now.
Yeah.
Little bit of a time. I just really look up to you and the things that you do. Like, I just see the way that you interact with your family, different things that you've done. I kind of picked up on that and taken it into my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember early on, you shared an audiobook with me, Tim Grover, Relentless.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to that times when I was running and just pulling different pieces of that into my life. And so, yeah, man, I'm just extremely grateful to have you as the first person that I actually sit down with and we have an actual conversation interaction. So
Yeah.
It means a lot to me that you're here. And so I thank you so much for that. But yeah, anyway, I kind of want to, let's get into a little bit.
Absolutely.
Tell us who you are, what you do, why you do what you do, and a little bit of that.
All right, so I'm Sherman, the crazy Asian, as I gave that title. It was from college. That's what people called me. But so what I do, I'm a father, husband, 4 sons, 1 daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So it ranges from 16 all the way down to 8 months. And then on the professional side, I run a team of financial advisors. And so it's a lot of coaching, a lot of recruiting. So you dive into things like diversity and kind of a recruiting process. But then on the coaching side, it could be, personal, professional development, and ultimately sales. That's really what a financial advisor will do, is look at kind of where people or businesses are and see what they can do and be able to solve needs.
Nice.
So, yeah, so been doing it been in the industry for over 16 years and then been in a role of leadership for 10 years. And really enjoy the opportunity just to pour back into someone else, to help them see where they want to go. And ultimately, there's a lot of just satisfaction as people gain their own, their own legs and their own confidence, their own understanding as the light bulbs go off for themselves of, how I can help myself and I can help my clients improve. It's really rewarding.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I've picked up earlier on, and why I wanted to sit down and have this conversation is because you have, I noticed that realness with you of wanting to help people, and I noticed you had my best interest in heart. It wasn't so for you to get something out of it. It was more of what can you do, little things to help push me to be a better person. Mm-hmm. And although we don't spend tons and tons of time together, the interactions that we had, even though they were little, to me have meant a lot. And so, yeah, it just means a lot to me.
And that's perfect. I mean, so, I read a great book, and a lot of people have seen the TED Talk, right, by Simon Sinek, Start With Why.
Yeah.
And I think on the offset, people a lot of times they go, my why is to earn money, or my why is to have this level of education. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an attorney. Mm-hmm. But that's not, because that's a destination, right? Once that's done, then what's next? Mm-hmm. And so as I started thinking about my why, I started digging in why do I make certain decisions the way that I do? And so it really came down to, for me, my purpose is to leave a legacy by positively impacting others. So for me, as I think about that, whether you and I engage just a quick DM on social, I want it to be positive in nature.
Yeah.
I'm not going to influence and inspire everybody with everything that I do. Mm-hmm. But if you and I have an opportunity to really connect, then I hope that the time was well spent, and I hope that what I've done has been positive. Now, people that know me for a long time, they know that I'm very flawed, just like everybody else. And so with that doesn't mean that there's perfection. It just means that I hope that in the net gain of everything, at the end, I hope there's more positive than negative in interacting with me.
Dude, for sure. And I there's one thing that I would really like for you to share is I remember something that you told me that kind of stood out was something that you did for your kids of recording clips. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you still do that, but if you could you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so if I can kind of take a little bit of a backstory. So my mom is the one that started it. So I was born in 1979, mm-hmm. and my mom started these letters in 1981 or 82. My youngest sister, she was born in 82, and she would call it Dear Kids. Mm-hmm. And so she would write these letters about her thoughts on college, thoughts on relationships, thoughts on friendship, mm-hmm. Pornography, intimacy. And so it wasn't, and they spanned decades. So anytime that she had a thought, almost like a journal or in a sense, she would write to the kids. And when I was 20 years old, I was serving a Christian mission in the Philippines. And she put it together and on my birthday mailed it to me. So there was this thick book that she had sent over of these letters for the last 20 years, right, of my life.
Wow.
And it was just amazing at that time to be able to dig in and read this, and just, I was like flabbergasted. I was just like literally taken back that like so much thought process from my parents about how to raise us kids.
Yeah.
And then for me then, when I became a parent, I thought, I want to do the same thing. I'm not a good writer. Like I'm not good. My handwriting's horrible. When I type, it's just real clunky. And so I started making videos. So at first it started, and actually this is funny because just a couple weeks ago I was looking at this. I'd actually had a dictation service, so I started dictating in like 2008. Okay. My oldest, obviously 16, so he was born in 05. So in 2008 I would dictate. And then I started making videos as YouTube was becoming more popular and a lot easier, and cell phones made it really easy because you're getting a better quality video. Yeah. And so I would write these, I would talk out kind of my thoughts of the day. And so some of it was, I wanted to be able to hear my struggle in the moment. Because, being a father now for 16 years, my thoughts on raising a 1-year-old or a newborn is way different because I've done it now 5 times.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain level of like, oh yeah, it's you'll be fine, you'll be good. But I want my sons and my daughter to know that, hey, in the midst of like 2021, I didn't have all the answers. Or in 2020 when COVID-19 hit, these were things that we were just, your mom and I were just trying to do, hoping for the best. And so, but if they're having a conversation with me 10 years down the road, my understanding of those nuances and that unknowns, they'll miss all that. The obstacles that we have in our day-to-day typically are going to be like speed bumps in a many miles of a road destination.
Right. So, I like that, man. And it's like too, they'll be able to look back on that and see like, oh wait, 20 years down the line, like Dad was going through these same struggles. How did he deal with them? He got through them, and they can be encouraged in knowing like, just to see where you were at with that, and just kind of understanding like, we're gonna get through this too, or what did Dad do to get through this? And then they have that, they just have that perspective that you had in the past in a video form, which is like very powerful.
And so it's meant to be like authentic and private. So some of it, sure, are certain topics like, hey, I'm struggling here with, one of you's, having a hard time at school making friends. Here's my thoughts on how to make a friend, right? Here's my thoughts on engaging with others and how to make friends and influence people, right? If I can use that book title, and so I can give that right as a thought. And so it doesn't need to be long-winded. I think a lot of times, like as a parent, you put on a facade like the Wizard of Oz, that you have all the answers. The reality is that we're kind of winging it based on what Mom and Dad taught us. Yeah. So if you had a good, parental guidance when you grew up, you can give good guidance because you're learning from somebody else. If you had garbage parents, because not all households are created equal, you're just winging it, man. You know what didn't work really well for you growing up, and so that's kind of the idea is, luckily in my life, I was given great parents. Yeah. And so my goal is to duplicate what they did that was well, at the same time, adjust it for me and take out anything that I question of, why am I doing it this way? Then I pull that out and go, should I still do it that way?
I like that. So how do you kind of get, because I feel like it takes a lot to give. How do you maintain like an optimistic kind of like positive impact or perspective on your life? Like, what do you do on a daily basis to kind of like maintain? Because I've seen like your posts on social media, it's always very like, you're giving a lot, and so you have to be full to give. So what do you do to like fill your cup?
Yeah, well, so one of this I would say for me is a total natural. It is a gift, right? So I think a lot of people are given different talents. There's a great book out there where they break down like, because I think a lot of times when we're younger, right? If someone were to ask me when I was 16, what are your talents? Well, I'm pretty good at basketball. I'm okay at volleyball, right?
Yeah.
I would think about things that I can see that are placed in a high school setting. But when you kind of start extrapolating like characteristics of human beings, like so Clifton StrengthsFinder 2.0 is the guy that kind of invented and took it down to like basically like 33 or 36 strengths. One of those strengths is positivity.
Oh,
And so
okay.
that is one of my, so you can take an assessment, and so my 5, one of them is positivity. So some of it, to be honest with you, I don't have to like think about. It's just who I am.
Got it.
I do avoid certain things though that can bring me down, right? So I'm always amazed at how many times people in their week will have a tough week, right? At the end of it, they're like, I need a beverage, I need a smoke, I need a hit, right? Like they need something external to take away whatever is negative. And for me, anytime that I look at whatever I might be doing, it could be food for me, right? I'm hitting up Whataburger or something, although I would like to probably hit that up later. So it's, we do certain things that either are positive or negative for us, right? You mentioned how you got into running with COVID because gyms were closed.
Right.
So that was a positive way for you to look at the lack of access to a gym, where so many other people in the United States and throughout the world said, I can't go to a gym, therefore I'm not going to exercise. And now they're 20 or 30 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
And so, because they still kept eating the same way and they got rid of all that exercise. And so for me, I think when we start looking at all the things that we're doing, they either add to our cup or they take away. And so luckily I chose a profession that I really enjoy. I work with people that I like. I go to a faith-based church for me that hits my qualities.
Yeah.
The principles that we're talking about, the religion, the spirituality, it bodes well with me. But I think for a lot of people, they still do things based on what they think others want them to do, right? So they grew up in a certain religion, so they think that they have to do it because that's what mom and dad want us to do.
Right.
Or they shop at particular places, they have a brand of clothing, they drive a particular car, they have to get into this house because that's what other people are doing, right? And so they think like the life needs to be formulaic, and it's totally not. And the moment that I think people start realizing, I need to make choices for me to be able to feel comfortable. Not everything is going to be enjoyable, but it should ultimately get to my happiness. You don't love running every single time, especially in Houston heat, but you know it's ultimately getting you to where you want to go.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I think that there's like the pleasure and the pain. I'm not saying like go be a masochist and like go cut yourself. Please don't do that. But I think the moment that we start realizing the certain things that I do want is going to require work. If I want a good relationship, I got to communicate. I got to be vulnerable. I got to tell her that, you know what? I am scared about my job, right? I'm in oil and energy, and I don't think my job's going to be that safe. I got to be real with my spouse or a significant other, right? I don't, I might come from a divorce, right? And so I might carry that with me, concerned that this relationship might end the same way. And she's given me no indications of that, but that's just something that I'm dealing with mentally. And when we're able to have those kind of conversations, we're able to have a greater relationship.
Right. So it's like kind of taking that. So you said you were like a positive person, kind of like that. Naturally, that's what you are. But it's also like just having an understanding of like what makes you happy, like what is driving you to happiness, and like just because society is telling you this is what is going to make you happy, you need to kind of look within and kind of. Sounds like that's what you did. Like you looked within and you found out these are the things that give me happiness, and you're not really worried about what other people are thinking about that or what other people are saying like you should be doing. You kind of like found your lane and you're doing your thing, you're being authentically you, and so that's leading you to happiness. And I would completely like agree too, like I see other people that are doing certain things and I just try not to compare myself. It's like as long as I'm running my race, like I'm gonna be happy doing my thing, and that's I just try to stay in that lane, because when you start comparing, it's like, okay, that's when it starts to get a little, happiness starts to, go away, or be a little bit harder. Yeah,
well, because what you're doing then at that point is now you're comparing your happiness scale on what somebody else is doing that has no effect, right? So
Yeah.
that's running is a perfect example, right? So get out of high school track and field or the Olympics, right? But when it comes to a race, we're all starting, right? And we're ultimately just wanting to finish. Now there's going to be people in there, men and women, that run at 4.5, 5 minute miles, right? They are just clipping at just some amazing speeds. But they might have started racing and running at like 8 years old or 6.
Right.
And so you and I going, hey, I'm not as quick as them. Well, you just started last year, right? So 1 year of training for running versus somebody's 20 years, I'm sorry, they're going to smoke you all day long.
Yeah, and I think about that too when I'm on the running trail. If somebody passes me, I'm like, a piece of me is like, I have to catch up to them.
Yes.
But then I'm like, I'm running my own race.
Exactly.
Like, first of all, I've already been running for 4 miles. They might have just started. Like,
that's right.
We're a different pace. They got a different goal. Like, yeah, I think that I love that example.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But to kind of transition there, like, basically you got a lot going on. There's a lot of things that you're doing, like, in life. You're balancing family. You just had a baby in December.
Yes.
How do you balance all that?
So I definitely take this one. I think it's a passage in the Bible, right? So there's a time and a season. And I think people can understand that, right? So when I was in college, single me, the time was to focus on education. There wasn't a pursuit of career. I did some odd jobs, stocking shelves, and I taught Tagalog, Filipino. So you do like these odd jobs, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, my job was student, and then I was done, and then the next stage was then working, and that's, to me, there's a very big variance, right? Because I think there's a million ways to earn money, and you have to find out what you enjoy and what lifestyle you want. And I think too often people get distracted with earning an income and then going, I need more, I need more, I need more, instead of going, this is my lifestyle. Like when they run all the stats, they find in the United States, if you pull about 80,000 as a household income, that gets you to happiness. Any money beyond that doesn't actually increase your happiness.
Okay.
So, because at that point, at 80,000 in most places in the United States, we're not talking about like New York City or like San Francisco, where it's cost of living is much higher, right? But at that point, you're probably able to have a roof over your head. You're having food, and you might have a little bit of entertainment. Now that doesn't mean you're going to to India to go visit the Taj Mahal. It doesn't mean you're going on a cruise every quarter. It doesn't mean that you're doing all these extra things. But at that point, you have all your needs being met without too much concern of, am I going to get my next meal from? Where when we kind of start extrapolating that throughout the rest of the world, that's their concern. So what we kind of get concerned with here in the United States is a very higher level of living. But it doesn't necessarily give me greater happiness. Now, so for example, I came here in a nice, reliable car.
Yeah.
But my level of happiness isn't greater in the most expensive car in the world. Now most people, they'll fight against that. They'll doubt that. But think about the car that you drove as a teenager versus a car that you might drive when you're 30. Your level of satisfaction in that car is identical. Happiness scale. But people in their mind, they fabricated to think, no, I will be happier. Just like people will say, I'll be happier when I own my own house. Although I'm renting the same square footage as a house, I'll be happier. Because what they don't take into account is all the maintenance, all the concerns that then take away from owning that house. The AC goes out, your pipes froze in February, right? Those all demand pulls away from the happiness scale. So same thing with driving around in a Bentley. I'm concerned about getting in an accident. I might not put on as many miles, right? Have you ever talked to anybody that has like a very nice sports car? They rarely drive the Ferrari, right? It's got like 2,000 miles on it. That means they're not really enjoying the happiness. The happiness is on a shelf in their garage. That's not happiness. Happiness is rolling around in it and not caring if it gets in an accident. But most people, when they start doing those things, spending that kind of money, they start getting concerned about the downside of it. So all that pulls away from that net happiness. I don't know if there's a real, I don't know if there's a scale, but somehow some psychologist, someone was figured out how to research it out.
Dude, I like that because I feel like for me, I don't need a lot to be happy. Like I have a very low level, like once I have these certain needs that are met and like my family's healthy and all these different things, like I'm good. Like nothing can like stop that. I am a very like ambitious person. Like I do want to achieve a lot of different things, but if it comes at an expense to that happiness, like I've been thinking about this so much, like as far as like mental, physical, like spiritual health, these certain categories, like it's just not worth any level of achievement to me if these things start to dip.
Yes.
And so that's just something that I've been thinking about. And then you kind of like basically like touched on that, like figuring out like your base level of happiness, and it's really not a financial thing. Like once you hit a certain level and you have this base level of like this is where your happiness is at, like it can become stressful if you you push it too much, you know? And
Absolutely.
that can like throw off the balance of like the happiness.
Yeah. Well, and so going back to the original question, right, so I'm a father of 5, right? But rewind me, gosh, I think you can rewind almost anybody's life 5 years, and it's dramatically different. So 6 years ago, I was a single dad of 3 boys. I was living in central Wisconsin. I was managing about 24 advisors through half of the state of Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I would drop my sons off at 6:30 in the morning at preschool or not like before school program. And then I would drive 90 minutes east or 90 minutes west to the offices there and deal with the agents and stuff in those locations. Then at 4:30 I would drive home, pick up my sons to after school program right at 6. And then we would get home, right? So then it's feed them, bathe them, get them ready for the next day, right? And so all of a sudden, but that was the necessity at the time. I was a single dad. I didn't have many options of anything else, right? And so now, fast forward now, to where I am today, I have no desire to put on that many miles. I have no desire to be that many hours away from the family. So my desires have changed because I've changed. I bring this up often. When I was younger, number one car I wanted, Porsche 911.
I love Porsche.
Would love to own it. But now, being a father of 5 children, that desire really gets pushed further down, right? Because if I wanted a car now, I'd actually want a Tahoe that can fit the entire gaggle of family that I have, right? And then the second car would be probably some kind of really, hybrid. Well, actually, it's the car that I have, a hybrid, so that way I can get a lot of gas mileage for what I do for work. And then the third car would probably, and then so my 6-year-old, he's got his car, right? The fourth car then, maybe that's the Porsche. Right? So you know what I mean? So all of a sudden, when I was younger at 12, that was the cool car to get. Fast forward my life now, and sorry, 16-year-old Sherm, like 12-year-old Sherm, you didn't know what the heck you were talking about. Because never in my mind as a young person did I envision fatherhood and husband in that Porsche equation. Now, if I was a single person today, no wife, no kids, you bet I would have a Porsche. But because my life changed, right? And so I think a lot of times that's one of the anxieties that a lot of people have, is that they're basing a lot of their life's decisions and expectations on these notions that they had as a child, and they didn't even know how much stuff even was. They had no concept of, like, my son, even at 16, doesn't even know what minimum wage is. Like, the actual number, does not know what it is. And so to have an idea that I want a Ferrari, and $258,000, he has no idea how he's going to even afford that.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And it's kind of like you're in a certain like box of like perspective. Like,
yes.
If you're, it's easy to like put yourself in that box, I guess, if you're like too zoned in on it. Yeah, but dude, I get it. Cause I wanted a Porsche too at like one point, but now I'm like, okay, I'm way more practical now. I'm like, will I be able to put my equipment in that car? Like, is it going to be smart for a family? And I also heard from Dave Ramsey, like, you're not supposed to buy a new car until you get until you have $1 million net worth. So I'm always thinking like, okay, I'm going to get a used car, 3 years. Like, So yeah, I get
And then
it.
it rains a lot here. You're really close to the ground.
Yeah.
I saw a Porsche get we had rain last week, and this Porsche got stuck in the high water.
Dude,
Because the exhaust, you're so low.
Right.
Sucks it right up.
Yeah. For sure. Oh, okay. So what I was thinking, as far as just to be vulnerable here.
Yeah.
So I've had basically conflict resolution. That's something that I kind of wanted to address and talk about, just because there's been some things as far as business relationships as well as personal relationships, friendships as well, that kind of I've noticed something that I guess I've picked up from my family and stuff like that, is that when there is conflict, instead of solving it and communicating and being productive about how to handle it, people would leave. And so, because I come from a divorced family and things like that, and so that's something that I've noticed. If I see somebody doing something that I don't necessarily agree with, instead of having a conversation and making things open and in the air,
Yes.
I would be okay, I just can't have that, and I would leave.
Yeah.
So, yes, but that's not the way you have good, healthy, long-term relationships.
Correct.
So what would you say, something that you've learned as far as conflict resolution in business, relationships, friendships? Just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are familiar with the phrase "don't burn any bridges," and that holds true in all relationships. And it doesn't mean that because the moment that you say we can agree to disagree, that's when you have to stop it. But the most times that people say it, let's agree to disagree, they then start arguing their point all over again. So you actually aren't agreeing to disagree. And so I think one of the struggles is that when people go into a conflict, they're looking for right or wrong. They're looking for my opinion to be validated by your opposing view. So think of it from a business perspective. We need to hit sales of 10,000 by the end of the year. I think that you and I should go door to door and start knocking. You think that we should spend time on social media, right? So you and I are going to fight back and forth about the concept of what to do. And in reality, we're probably both right. But because we're both looking at the same problem from a different perspective, we think that someone's wrong here. And so what happens in that conflict is, it reminds me, so there's a comic of someone standing outside of a parking lot, and he's looking at the stall. So he's standing right here at the stall, and then the other person's standing on the exact opposite. It's a 9. It's also a 6. And so depending on your perspective, they're both right, but they're literally arguing that it's a 9 or a 6, and they're both right. It's just that they don't have the opportunity to turn the table 180 and say, let me see it from your perspective. So if for me, because I'm comfortable going door to door, I'm not going to see it from your perspective. But if I were to say, okay, well, show me why you think that way. And so that's where I think a lot of times in almost any conflict, right? If you and I can just take the step back, swallow our pride, and say, let me see it from your perspective. And the moment that we start thinking it through honestly, we can start realizing, oh, you know what? That was right. So
That's good.
That literally happened yesterday. My wife's teaching my son, he's 4, how to do the lowercase e, okay, drawing it out. And so I come in down from work, and she's now she's getting frustrated with him, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you getting all frustrated? So I don't know the amount of half hour or whatever time that she's already put in, right? So again, I'm coming in with lack of perspective, and I start, just relax. You don't need to be getting all frustrated, right? And so in her mind, she goes, here's this guy coming in, has no context of how long I've been working with our son, and he's judging me? So just immediately in that moment, I've gone from quick reaction and judgment on what she's doing, and I have no context for that judgment. And so that's what happens a lot of times, is that I didn't look at it from her perspective, so then she got upset, right? Because I didn't understand the context. So when I was on my run, it was a good way to kind of think about these things, and I realized if I was doing that and she came down and had the reaction that I did, I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
Like this guy, or she's coming down, judging me. She has no context of what I've been working with here and what I've been doing. And so I realized the moment that I started putting my feet in her shoes, I was wrong. And so immediately I just came back and I apologized. And she's like, what made you think of it? And I said, well, I just put myself in your shoes. And I was totally wrong. And she's like, you're right. You were wrong. But that's where I think that's the problem, is that for conflicts, we will hold on to our opinions. And you even talk to somebody, hey, and the conflict's gone, right? They will still argue as if the conflict's still there. If you had a chance to watch Malice in the Palace.
I did, dude. That's
right?
so good.
So they still, the players are still holding on to it. The fans are still holding on to it. Like it just happened. This was like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But they still hold that what they did was totally right.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I love that. Like, I think that's such a good point of just the context and just understanding where the other person is seeing it from, because it's so easy to only see it from your perspective. And then also, like, the pride aspect is so hard. It's like coming back after there is a conflict and being like, hey, look, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't see it from your perspective. I love that. Like,
And the other thing, when it comes on the personal side, just because I say I'm sorry doesn't immediately make it better.
Right.
And so sometimes there just needs to be a little time. Maybe we got a little bit heated. Maybe we said some things we didn't want to say. And so we need some time to kind of cool down. You mentioned the kind of walking out. That's what I used to do, right? So if anytime that like someone would argue with me, I'd be like, fine, forget it. I'd say my piece, I'd drop the mic, and I'd be like, forget it, I'm out. And then I'd walk away, right? Because I got the last word in.
Yeah.
But if the other person that I'm, arguing with, if they would prefer to have dialogue, then what I've done is I've literally I've added an insult to injury, right? So we're already arguing, and now I've said like, peace, I'm out. I've now not given them the opportunity that they want, that they need in order to work out the conflict. And so because you just noticed it right there for yourself, right? If I walk away, is that the right move? Sometimes it is in certain circumstances, right? Because some arguments that we have they're delicate, right? Like, someone just found out that their spouse is cheating on them. Like, that is so high tension.
Yeah.
Not every single play in the book is going to work.
Right.
But if you can still come at it where you can dialogue it through productively, and you might need time. You might need to say, look, I can't see you for like a day, for 2 days. Just give me space in order before I can have a dialogue with you.
To recover from something like that.
Yeah. Or grief, right? Like someone's going to COVID, or someone just lost their parent. Like all these things that you and I go through, they can get real, and that conflict can be just raw.
Yeah, and it can be totally like hard to deal with that for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, like I was saying, like it's easy for me to want to walk away or like do these certain things, and of course, like you were saying, like it's depending on what the scenario is, maybe it is the right decision to walk away, but for the most part, I think too, taking a step back and like taking a minute before you make an emotional decision of like thinking that is healthy as well. But yeah, so what would you say as far as like best piece of advice you ever gotten over like just the course of your life, course of your career? One piece of advice that you would share.
Probably the best was successful people will successful people will build habits in what unsuccessful people will not do. So for example, successful people, let's say you're in sales, successful people will make phone calls, they'll shoot out emails, they'll ask for the business, they'll ask for referrals, they're relentless. People that are unsuccessful in sales don't ask, they don't want to make the tough phone calls, they don't ask for referrals, they don't get out of their comfort zone. And so you can paint that across the board in anything, right? You look at like a lot of athletes, right? We'll come back to football, and you can tell that those will be successful this season, worked out in the off season. Now, it might not have been to the same degree as it was during the season, but those that are in shape don't have to get in shape. And so they're that much further ahead. So come game time, they're probably going to perform much better come February and March, if they're, or not February, January, February, when it really, really matters.
Right.
And that's really where I'd say for a lot of people, when they can build those habits of success, and the reality is they don't like it, right? Like coming out in sales, I had to document how many dials I made. I made like 32,000 dials in 5 years.
Wow.
So for me, as I look at that, like it was just a history of work. Like that's all it was just work. And so I know for me though, it created a habit to put in the work. It doesn't make me better. It doesn't make me more intelligent. It just made me more persistent. And it built a habit that led to success. And so we can see all those things, right? Whether somebody wants to work out, get into shape, nutrition, exercise, all these things that you and I both know, go to the work. What's the work that's required to get there? Somebody says, hey, I want to build a social media following. Again, put in the work. Are you creating content? Are you engaging with people? Are you following hashtags? Right? Are you reading what others are doing? Are you getting all in on a particular metric or platform to be able to make yourself an expert? And if the answer is no, then you're not putting in the work.
Right.
And so amateurs don't get paid like professionals.
True. And so, one more time, you said successful people
will
build habits that unsuccessful people won't do. Is that correct?
Yeah, in things that unsuccessful people will not do. So think of whatever it needs to get done. Successful people have figured a way to make that a habit.
Right.
So perfect example, right? You're running for a marathon. You've created a habit of running. The unsuccessful people that aren't running a marathon, which is the majority of the world's population, they've decided, I'm going to build a habit of watching TV and binge watching Netflix and hanging out at the couch. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Those are their choices. But when people ask you, oh man, how'd you get into this shape? How'd you do it? For you, it's probably pretty simple. I started this and I kept doing it.
Right. Dude, I like that. Just success over time, building those strong habits, because like the habits that we build and the habits, like you're saying, if you get into the habit of Coca-Cola and Netflix every night, I mean, you're going to get Coca-Cola and Netflix results.
Yeah,
but if
you it's delicious.
Yeah, it's great in the short term, but it will,
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, if it works for you, like that is your happiness.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Like, for sure, but for me, and for you as well, like there's certain habits that we built that lead to our happiness.
Yeah.
And so, dude, I love that.
Time and season.
Yeah. Dude, well, this was great. Like this first episode of actually having like a candid conversation, and this is episode 7 of Lessons with Strangers, which is crazy, man. 7 episodes in. Yeah. Before we head out of here, I'm gonna plug yourself, tell everybody about where they can find you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Sherman, last name's On. It's basically all the handles. It's almost always Sherman On. There's a few that might have a weird number behind it, but you'll be able to find me. You can feel free to email me, sherman.on@mutualomaha.com. I think for a lot of people, for me, I just put it out there. You might have questions about personal finance. You might have questions about business finance. You might have questions about, starting, you decided to get in the career of financial services and you have questions. Feel free to reach out. I think a lot of times people realize that they can Google anything, but they want to hear it customized for how it deals with them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I could do in helping people understand how they can implement it in their own lives.
For sure. Sweet. And we'll also have like all your information linked in the Instagram and the YouTube and wherever we post this. I'll make sure to like tag you and have all that stuff in there.
Sounds good.
And I would highly recommend doing that. So, yeah. All right, dude. Well, that was it for episode 7 of Lessons with Strangers. Thank you for being a part, dude.
Thanks very much.
And we'll see y'all in the next one.
See you, man.
See ya.